You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Home Field Apparel.
Welcome back to CrimsonCast. The 20th of March. No IU in the tournament right now, so we got to find other things to talk about. And we got a fun show for you today, folks. So, special guest who I don't think has ever actually been on CrimsonCast. Have you been on CrimsonCast before?
No, but I've been a supporter since the very beginning.
You have. It's funny, the people who haven't been on the show who should have been. We've been trying to like check all those boxes over the last year or so. So Tricia Whitaker joining us, who, if you're on IU social at all, you know. Tricia, good to see you. How you doing?
Oh, I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing good. So we're going to talk with Tricia.
My Bison t-shirt that you gave me.
I know, the CrimsonCast Bison, which people saw the picture of you wearing it and immediately started like haranguing me, like, where can we buy those? And folks, I've failed as a commerce expert. I have not had time to get those out. So I appreciate Tricia like giving us the boost early on there. So yeah.
The boost that did not come to fruition, but yeah, sure.
Well, I'm just trying to hold the audience as long as possible. Like, we'll just keep building demand up. But yes. So next time though, yeah.
The wait list.
Did you bring that to Florida with you?
You just hold on just a second. Okay?
This is good. This is how good that CrimsonCast shirt is, folks. For those of you who are watching, you're about to see. There we go. Yep, there it is. That's beautiful.
You make it stylish for like if you're a girl who loves crop tops like me, you just tie it up like that and wear it, or you can wear it as a normal t-shirt. I got so many comments on it. It was the IU Kansas game.
It was.
When I was with Christian Watford and Derek Elston and Colin Hartman and all those guys, when they were doing the podcast, I took a picture with them with this shirt on, and everybody's like, what is that? Is that the Bison?
Yeah. It was the greatest piece of viral marketing I think ever pulled off with IU. Yes. I love that Bison. Everybody's like, where did the Bison come from? I was like, honestly, I just bought it off of a web service. There was some dude who like designed a Bison, and I was like, that Bison is effing perfect. I need that on the show. We're going to switch some branding over to that. We've got t-shirts that I'm not selling. Like, it's almost perfect except for the executional part of all of it.
We'll get there, you know.
Eventually. But before we get there, we do need to talk about the folks that didn't make that shirt, but make thousands of other shirts and who sponsor this show and the rest of the Back Home Network. Home Field Apparel, your place to go for the finest in college fashions, the softest fabrics, the coolest designs. I am actually wearing perhaps the best March combo for Home Field. I have the new IU shooting shirt, which is pretty awesome. Well, here, I'll back up. You can see like this in all of its glory. There you go. See,
I just need one of those.
Yeah, you do. But I've comboed it with the second best piece of apparel, which is the Let's Shock the World Fairleigh Dickinson shirt from last year.
That's incredible.
Hey, got to do what you got to do. 'Tis the season to watch Purdue lose to a 16 seed, maybe.
Oh, man. I will never forget that. That was the best.
I always, Matt Blaska, longtime friend of the show, and I watched that game in pieces at Fat Dan's, and then it's the Smokeworks bar of all places in town. And might have been like the best combo basketball night I've had in a long time, because, of course, it got followed up by Indiana beating Kent State in the next game.
Yes, it did. Oh, that's right. They both played on the same night.
Yep. That was
that
amazing. There was an incredibly drunk ESPN employee in the Smokeworks bar who bought everybody 2 rounds of shots during the end of the Purdue Fairleigh Dickinson game.
Incredible.
It was great. It really was. But anyway, folks, if you would like to be as stylish as me wearing these various pieces of apparel, go to homefieldapparel.com, use the code HOME23, get 15% off your first order. And they just had their whole like March season of goodness. They had everything from like mystery t-shirt boxes to jerseys. They have socks now, just a little bit of everything. Of course, a ton of IU stuff. So head over to homefieldapparel.com, give them a follow on Instagram and elsewhere. Also, just a reminder, we are on Substack, crimsoncast.substack.com. It's free. You get episodes delivered right to your email inbox. You can open them and actually like click on the links and not have to go to Twitter. to access those. And we have a VIP section where we occasionally will shoot extra videos that don't make it out to the general population. You can check those out as well. So again, crimsoncast.substack.com. We'd love to have you in the community. Anyway, Tricia, let's start off. We're going to talk baseball in a little bit. We have some questions actually from our Back Home Network Discord when I said, hey, we got a special guest on to talk baseball. We immediately questions got fired. I'll tell you all folks right now, we're not going to talk about the Ohtani news today. Oh. I shared a theory with Tricia on this offline, which I'm not going to talk about here. But wow, fascinating story on that. But we do have some actual season questions we're going to talk about. But first, we wanted to talk IU. And unfortunately, we can't do a whole lot in talking about IU right now, since the only thing they're in right now is the portal, at least on the men's side. The women are playing this Saturday. We're excited about that. But wanted to kind of walk everybody back and give the Tricia Whitaker media origin story, since you got your start as an IU student covering a variety of IU sports. So for those who aren't in the know, let's start off with where you came from and what you were doing while you were here.
Well, I was raised in Bloomington, so I got to have the unique experience of not just being a student there watching like IU basketball in the history. I actually was a child when Bob Knight got fired in Bloomington, and when they went to the national championship against Maryland and lost, I watched it at Assembly Hall with my dad on the big screen and cried when they lost. So through and through fan there. But then I went to IU and I covered which horrible season. One horrible football season where they went 1-11. It was horrendous, but I covered that team. And it actually taught me so much about sportscasting and all that stuff. So even though it was a terrible season, it really primed me for covering bad teams for the rest of my career. Even though now I don't cover such a bad team, but so I did that, and I covered IU basketball all the time. And the team I covered is actually on my wall. That's the team that I covered. That's the Watt shot. That's in my living room right above my couch. So I covered that group of guys primarily. So Christian Watford, Victor Oladipo, Cody Zeller, Will Sheehy, Jordan Hulls. Who am I missing there? Lots of guys. Taylor
Verdell Jones,
Tom Pritchard,
Matt Roth.
Matt Roth, yes, Matt Roth. So I covered them, and Tom Crean, right? I remember when he got hired, and then also after that, after that, I went to Green Bay, Wisconsin, covered the Packers for 2 years at the local ABC. That was a really awesome experience. And when the Packers weren't playing, I covered like fishing tournaments and froze my butt off.
Log rolling,
yeah. Sturgeon spearing, if anybody's ever heard of that. It's a wild thing where people in Wisconsin just get really drunk and sit on the ice in an ice house and stab prehistoric looking fish. So out of IU, I did that. And then when I went to Indianapolis after Green Bay to be a local sports anchor for CBS and Fox, I got to cover IU basketball again and IU football again. So I covered when Archie Miller got hired. It's a very short stint, but I covered that, right? And that was really cool to be there for that, even though it didn't pan out. But so I got to cover IU from the student perspective and then from the professional perspective. And I always tell people that I'm so grateful to have gone to a school like IU where you had that type of experience at your disposal, where you could be covering the Big Ten conference, right? I mean, not saying that covering other places isn't cool too, but just like that type of atmosphere was like, it was just imperative,
right?
Where I am now.
Hard to match that at like Worthen Arena in Muncie or something like that.
Yeah, not really the same feel.
Did you, if you take the Watt Shot game out, did you have a favorite game that you covered, or was there like an athlete you were like that was really that you? I mean, it was for instance last year you interviewed Kyle Schwarber as part of your Apple TV duties, and he was in school when you were in school.
He was, yeah. That was a full circle moment for me too, because I don't think I ever interviewed Schwarber when I was at IU. I might have, but I don't know. But yeah, covering IU baseball briefly when I was there, it was very minimal. But yeah, Schwarber was there when I was there. And then for Apple TV last year, I interviewed him for the first time. It was Phillies Astros. So it was a nationally broadcast game, and he had a great game. So he was the post-game interview. And I went up to him before the game and I go, hey, I don't think we've ever met, but I'm Tricia. He's like, nice to meet you, Tricia, weirdo. And I'm like, no, okay. I buried the lead there. I was like, I went to IU at the same time you did. He was like, no, can I cuss?
Yeah,
He goes, no, you're shitting me. And I was like, I'm not. And then I whipped out the names and I go, Jeremy Gray? And he was like, shut up. And I was like, yeah. I was like, that's one of my favorite people in the whole wide world. And then of course I, dropped all the Bloomington like landmarks on him. I was like, yeah, we were probably at Nick's English Hut at the same time playing Sink the Biz.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh my gosh, KOK, all this stuff. So then after the game, he was the star of the game interview. And it was just a full circle moment because I was like, and then I grew up a Cubs fan too.
Right.
So like when they won the World Series, Schwarber was on that team. And like, that was like such a cool moment with my dad because he was the reason I was a Cubs fan. And so anyways, it was just a cool full circle moment. And like other places, other universities, like, I don't know, you just don't have some of those names that come through there.
Right.
And that was really unique for IU.
So you were in Indy, as you said, as a sports anchor and reporter for a while. Then you end up moving into one of your two current roles, which is as sideline reporter for the Tampa Bay Rays. So that's a big, different type of job than what you were doing before. So how has that experience been? And, what are the things you enjoy the most about that particular role?
So this job, what I love about it is I've always wanted to, I think Galen, even like the first time you met me, I think I was just this silly little 20-year-old who had a dream of being a sportscaster. And I'm pretty sure you asked me what I wanted to do. What did I say?
You said you wanted to be a sideline reporter in baseball specifically. Yes.
I did. I said that. And so I heard about this job opening one night when I was out with my friend Taylor Tannenbaum, who's now killing it with the ACC network and ESPN, doing college football and college basketball. She's just a freaking star. But like, she looked at me and it was after, like, I always tell this story because people always think you find jobs like on a job website or like your agent sends them to you. It's like, no, I found this job because I had 3 glasses of wine with Taylor, a random night in Indy. And she said, oh, Trish, I thought of you. One of my friends is leaving her sideline reporter job with the Rays. Don't you love baseball? And I was like, yes. And she was like, I think you should apply for that job. So I'm like 3 glasses of wine in and I text my agent and I'm like, hey, heard this job is open. Can you ask about it? He's like, yeah, of course I will. I wake up the next morning and I have this text from my agent. He goes, they want to talk to you. And I'm like, who wants to talk to me? What are you talking about? I didn't do anything. I didn't do it. And he's like, the Rays. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I was like, I applied to be a sideline reporter for a Major League Baseball team last night, which I've always wanted to do. So like it by no means was a mistake. It was very purposeful, but like it was just a hilarious sequence of events that led to that. And I texted Taylor and I go, do you remember our conversation last night about the Rays? She was like, well, yeah, of course. I was like, well, I applied and now I have an interview. And she's like, you are so weird, but cool. I was like, yeah. So I interviewed for the job, got the job. Love it. Like, I adore my job. Like, I tell Galen all the time, I'm like, this is like the job I've always wanted. Because you get to know a team, you get to know like the players' aunts and their grandmas and their second cousins. I mean, it's bizarre, like what you get to do. And so I've been doing that. This will be my 6th season, which is insane to say. And then I know, isn't that weird?
It is weird.
Yeah. And then in 2022, got a call halfway through the season. Apple TV was starting Friday Night Baseball, which is an exclusive nationally televised broadcast of whatever matchup it is. So opening weekend, we have Yankees Astros, and it's national, it's exclusive. Nobody else can have that. So they called and asked if I would be interested in that role. And, I was like, yes, I am. I think I would be interested in that. So I do that on Friday nights. We go around the country, do all sorts of games and matchups. And the product, like, especially visually, is incredible because they have like the most, it's Apple. They have the most state-of-the-art equipment. And it's wild the things that they can do. And like we had Albert Pujols in 2022, he hit his 700th, he hit his 699th and then 700th home run on the broadcast that we had and made history at Dodger Stadium. Well, that's now captured on the best cameras in the entire world because it was an Apple game. I mean, it was so cool. So anyways, that's how I got here. And I absolutely love it. I mean, it's the best.
Yeah. Well, how does for those who don't know, like, how does that work? You're the sideline reporter for a team, but you're also working for Apple. So, like, the Rays just kind of give you up for a couple of days a week.
They give me up. Yeah. They're more like, yeah, Trish, go, please. We've had enough of you for no, I'm just kidding. They are the Rays in Valley Sports Florida is where all the Rays games are aired on the regional sports network. And they just let me go on Fridays. And I have a fill-in. His name's Ryan. He's great. And he fills in for me on Fridays and Saturdays when I'm gone, because I have decided last year I was insane. And I didn't take Saturdays off. So I would literally fly out Thursday night after the game, land in like Houston or sometimes Seattle or whatever it was at like midnight, wake up, go to the park, do the Friday night game. Those games don't get over till late, so I'm not done till midnight. Wake up the next morning at like 3:30 or 4 a.m. to catch a 5 a.m. flight back to Tampa to do the Saturday 4 p.m. game, of which I have to be at the park at 11 a.m. Yeah. I mean, that was insane. It was crazy. I mean, like I talked to you a lot about it. And like, there came a certain point where like my friends and my boss, she looked at me and she was like, you have got to sleep and you have to prioritize sleep. And so this year I decided to take off Saturdays. So I come back to the Rays on Sunday and then I do that week with them. And I have Wednesdays off at home this year. So that's good too. But like last year in the middle of the season, I got like deathly ill. Like you remember that. It was horrible because I was working myself to death. If there's anybody listening who's in the sportscasting field, like just remember that like you need to give yourself time to breathe and sleep. And so anyways, moral of the story, I'm going to be breathing and sleeping on Saturdays this year.
I'm proud of you for making these decisions. I might do that myself someday and like, not take the fifth job.
When I say if there were any sportscasters listening, I might have been talking to you.
Don't know who we're talking to here. Yeah.
Well, like both of us, you and I both love our job so much and what we do that we tend to like, just like, we don't say no to things. You don't say no to things.
Guilty as charged. Now, hey, look, I think especially in this business, part of it is you're worried if you say no, someone else gets it, and then you stop getting opportunities. And there's like this baked in insecurity, I think, among most sports broadcasters of any type, anchor, reporter, sideline, play-by-play, that if you don't take everything, you'll eventually have nothing. I've heard like Dan Patrick has talked about that. And I've heard other people on ESPN talk about it, where you have to come to a realization that, hey, you're good at your job. That's why you're getting hired. And they won't think less of you if you say, I'm going to sit that one out and let someone else have it.
Now, I will say early in your career, I would be a yes person.
Sure.
When you can be, right? When I was like 22 years old,
the problem is, and this probably happens in other businesses, you never realize when you're not earlier in your career. Like you're in your brain, like you just said it, like you're still 23 and working in Wisconsin, and it doesn't strike you that, wow, you're no longer that. And I deal with this all the time, where it's like, we're at a different phase. So. It's
true though. It's almost like post-traumatic stress disorder from when you started the industry and you're just like, I can't say no. Yeah. It's like, no, like my boss was like, Trish, just because you're not here on Saturdays doesn't mean you can't be here on Sundays. She was like, we'll be here. Like the Rays will be here. And I'm like, oh, you're right.
So when you're working with a team like this, you're traveling with them as well. It's not just doing the games at home. So you're going on the road. Like what is that whole process like for you? Obviously, the players, it's very regimented. They've got, all the things that they have to do to get ready for every game. What does the sideline reporter have to do on those trips, and how do you manage that whole transition?
Well, my suitcase weighs about 100 pounds because sometimes we'll be going like on a 2-week road trip, and part of it'll be like in Seattle and then the other part's in Anaheim. Well, those are two completely different climates at certain points in the year. So you have to pack a lot. So I pack a lot of clothes, and then I do fly with the team. So that makes it easier. And sometimes we're in cities for like 4 days. Sometimes it's 3 days, which is kind of nice. You get to settle in a little bit, but you do realize that your apartment just becomes, or your house becomes more of just like a locker during the season because you're never there. But yeah, I fly with the team. I go with them. And then when we're on the road, we just kind of do the broadcast as normal. It's fun on the road though, because like, it's different. There are different things in a stadium, different things in a city. So we try to do fun things with guys. So like when I was in San Diego one year, we did an Anchorman quiz to see who could name the most Anchorman quotes, because I knew we had a group of guys in the clubhouse who loved Anchorman. And so we did that, and that was super fun. So we'll do things like that make it kind of fun, so that the viewer feels like they're traveling with us. Or like in San Francisco, in the Giants Stadium, there's the McCovey Cove.
Right.
You can take kayaks out.
This is a good video. People need to go find this video if they haven't watched it yet.
You can take kayaks out there and try to catch the home run ball. So I kayak through the bay into McCovey Cove and did like a race with the guys who do it or whatever. Of course I lost, but those are the types of things we do on the road, and it's really fun. But you got to take a lot of vitamins. Like, I mean, seriously, when I got so sick last year, my friend Meredith Morakovitz, who works she's the sideline reporter for the Yankees. She texted me, she goes, "There's going to be a package delivered to your door tomorrow." And I'm like, okay. So I get it. And it's this package of 6 different types of vitamins that she was like, because she's been doing the Yankees for like over a decade. She's a freaking pro. And she was like, "When I first started, I did exactly what you did. And I overexerted myself and I didn't take care of myself." She said, "These are the vitamins that you are going to be taking from now on. You will take this many every single day." And she was right. It works. So when I'm on the road, I'm very strict about that regimen too. But I love traveling on the road. It's so much fun to see. I only have one ballpark left that I have not broadcast in. Do you know which one it is? It's actually in the Midwest.
Is it? I'm trying to think.
Is it shirt you're wearing?
Is it the Reds?
No, that's close. Sorry, that was a bad hint. It's the Cardinals.
Oh, you haven't broadcast with the Cardinals. That's fascinating.
No, I broadcast with the Cardinals, but
not there. Yes,
yeah, not there.
Interesting. Is that happening this year?
It's happening this year. The Rays are playing there, so I'm going to cross all of the stadiums off of my list.
What we talked about this on text, but obviously the audience didn't read our texts, thankfully. What is your what is your favorite? What's your favorite ballpark?
Oh man. Okay. So I always separate it into 2 categories. I get that question all the time. I put it in one category of historic ballparks because I don't think it's fair to compare like a Wrigley to like a San Diego. Those aren't even this. It's like apples and oranges. It's not the same. So my favorite new era ballpark is without a doubt San Diego. I mean, it is the most gorgeous ballpark. The area surrounding it is super cool. And they also incorporated like an old school warehouse. It's the Metal Factory Company or something. It's been there since like the early 1900s or something. And they left it there to build into the stadium. And I love when stadiums do that because I don't want it to be too fancy.
Right.
So it still has that old time feel. It's just a gorgeous stadium. My favorite, like historic stadium. I mean, it's obviously Wrigley because I grew up a Cubs fan, but that's a little biased. Now this is not going to make Rays fans happy, but I think Fenway is like one of the coolest ballparks. The Green Monster is so cool. Like it's huge. I feel like on TV you can't tell, but it's huge. And like it's almost like some people would be like, that place is like so gross. And I'm like, okay, well, you're not totally wrong. Like it's very run down, but it's like a preserved time capsule.
Right.
And it's just so cool to me. I just think it's awesome. And then I got to sign the Green Monster at Fenway my first year with the Rays, which was really, really cool. But yeah.
Those are both. I mean, I've been to both. They're both awesome for completely different reasons. And I love, I mean, both of those. The stadium's great, but the area around the stadium is great also. I mean, San Diego's got that whole district right around it. And then obviously they've done a really good job building up around Fenway. I mean, granted, I haven't been to Fenway literally in 17 years, but I'm assuming not a whole lot has changed.
It's the same. Yeah. You wouldn't know a difference.
Yeah. So let's talk about the season coming up. This is an interesting season. It was kind of a weird. First of all, let's start at the World Series last year. If Major League Baseball at the beginning had been asked, like, what teams do we want in the World Series? That might have been the last choice that they would have had. But it was a fun World Series to watch, even though it didn't have like the fan connection that you would get if you had the Dodgers or the Yankees or teams like that. And I like that personally because I think it's like when the Royals went to the World Series, like it was a decade ago now. It's like we got to throw markets a bone every once in a while. Right. But it kind of makes for an interesting scene because there were so many teams last year, the Yankees being a great example of one of those teams, the Dodgers, obviously, the Phillies, like a lot of teams that were built to win that year. And now we're past that year, and it's like, well, what the heck happens? And looking at the win projections and everything like that, it's just both leagues feel a little bit unsettled. Obviously you've got the Dodgers now with Ohtani. They continue to add things. But from your perspective, like, what do you think are the big storylines in terms of, what teams look like they're in the best shape? What are the player stories that you think are going to be the most interesting? Like, what sticks out to you for this upcoming year?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I agree with you on the whole World Series thing, right? Like the Diamondbacks and the Rangers, that's not exactly like a ratings seller.
Right.
But I also think it's good for baseball. Like, I know obviously the ratings would have been insane if it was like, the Yankees or the Phillies. If they would have beat the Diamondbacks, the ratings would have been even better, it would have been a lot better. But I think it's good for baseball for some of those like teams that haven't really had that type of success in the postseason to like sniff that, because it does create what people forget about baseball is that so much of baseball fandom is generational fans, right? So like obviously some NBA teams have generational fans, but like it's more like, I really like basketball and I really like the Stars. I follow a athlete, right? But for baseball, it's more like my family follows this team and we've always followed this team, or my grandpa follows this team. So like, I think that can have a trickle down effect for baseball in the future for like the Diamondbacks market and the Rangers market, because let's be honest, when you think of Dallas,
anytime the team doesn't have a city name in it, it's probably maybe doesn't have a core of fans, You don't
think of the Rangers, you think of the Cowboys, like, and that's also kind of an NFL thing too. They're kind of king, but I agree with you. I think that it was interesting and I enjoyed it. But in terms of this year, I think I can speak definitely to like the AL East for certain, right? And that's the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Blue Jays, the Orioles, and the Rays. I think it's still going to be a good division. I think it's going to look a little bit different than it did last year. So like the Rays look a lot different. They don't have the same starting rotation that they did last year. A couple of the same guys, but not really. The Orioles last year, they just like went from, talk about a team that made a turnaround. I mean, I remember in 2021 or 2019. I can't remember which year it was, but the Rays went 19-1 against them. 19-1.
Hard to do.
And then the Orioles turn around last year and notch a 100-win season. Like, that's incredible. So I think they're going to be a team to certainly watch. They've got a lot of young guys who are super, super fun to watch. They're good guys too. I know they're in the Rays division, but I actually enjoy covering them when I have them for Apple. The Blue Jays have some stars on their team, obviously, but I think so much of it, the attention is going to be definitely on Ohtani and the Dodgers. When you look at how much they opened their wallet this offseason with Ohtani and Glasnow and everything that they did. But the interesting thing to me is like, I feel like so many off seasons, we go into the year and we're like, wow, that team really spent a lot of money. They made a lot of moves. And then it's just like a bust. Like the Padres were like that.
Right.
Spent so much money on a team that didn't even make the postseason. And everybody's talking at the beginning of the year how good they're going to be. And I'm like, baseball's way more complicated than that. It's way more complicated than just having like 5 stars. I would argue stardom in baseball is like, I mean, unless you're like an Ohtani and a Glasnow or something, it's not really a valuable quality.
Well, and you're in a position that's really interesting because you work for a team that's kind of become the modern day Moneyball Oakland A's style team where they don't spend a lot of money. Their free agents generally leave. They keep finding young prospects and they play well, and that keeps them in contention. And it's, that's one of the things that they've talked about with baseball over the last few years is that you've had multiple playoff teams in the bottom third of payroll across baseball because it isn't necessarily about signing the best free agents. It's really about fit, which is hard on an open marketplace because you don't know if the person that you're signing is actually going to fit in with what you're trying to do.
No, or buy in with what you try to do too. There's a lot of egos. Like anybody who says there's not egos in baseball, you're not paying attention. There's egos, right? A certain guy wants to play a certain position. Well, you're not going to play that position. We're putting you here because we need you here, or we're putting you here in the lineup, right? doesn't happen it's pretty black and white when it comes to like the NFL and the NBA. You're either playing or you're not. Like it's, it's not really, it's different. And so I think that's a huge part of it. And then I think it's just kind of like when you have a bunch of stars on one team, I don't necessarily think that works. I mean, I feel like we've seen that time and time again with a lot of professional teams. You just stack a bunch of stars on a team and it's just like, it didn't really work. So, but you're right. The Rays are kind of the Moneyball team. They have the lowest payroll in baseball. Yet for the last 5 years in a row, they've made the postseason. You know how many franchises would give their left arm to have made the postseason 5 years in a row? And in 2 decades, made the World Series twice? Like twice. They've made the World Series in the last 2 decades. And I hate when people come to me and they're like, well, the Rays haven't, they've been there since 1998 and they haven't done much. What? Are you serious? Let's talk about how many franchises have been to the postseason 5 years in a row or the World Series twice in 2 decades. As
a Reds fan, I would kill for that record. That just even half of the World Series appearances in that time period would have been great. So yes, it's, I think to some degree, people lose sight of how hard it is to do those things. And, you see the Yankees, you see the Red Sox and what they did in the 90s and the 2000s. And it's like, well, just regularly you're going to go to the playoffs or go to the World Series. It just doesn't work that way. No. So it is really interesting to watch. And especially now, it just feels like you get these teams that pop up and have a great season like the Orioles, and then they regress back to the pack, but then someone else pops up in their place. And the Phillies were terrible for most of the 2010s, and then they suddenly turn it around and make some smart moves. And it is really fascinating. It is also interesting though, because, baseball is such a different sport in the postseason. So many people end up judging your overall success on, well, did you get to a World Series or win a World Series? When it's in a completely different sport, it requires completely different performances from your players. Totally different performances for your players. It's 162 games plus how many spring training games? 30? Yeah.
Plus the postseason. I mean, that's insane. That's so many games. And we could argue all day about whether or not MLB should cut down on the number of games, but at the end of the day, that's how many games they play. And if you've got an everyday player, that's a lot of wear and tear on your body. So you get to the postseason and it does become a completely different game.
Yeah.
And man, and I always it's crazy. Last year the Rays started with the most incredible start. I think they made history. It was like a 13-0 start or something like that, which everybody was like, oh, they haven't really played very many good teams. It is incredibly difficult to win 13 baseball games in a row. If you know anything about baseball, it's incredibly difficult to do that. Obviously, the Rays ended up losing in the postseason in the first round. But then here's the thing. You look at some of these other teams, like the Phillies, during the regular season, they weren't exactly the best team.
No.
They weren't very good, to be honest. They were fine. They were good, but it's not like they were on that 100 win pace like the Orioles or like the Rays were, right? But all that matters is if you make the postseason in baseball. That's literally all that matters. And then it's such a cliche phrase, but the records, scratch them. Yeah. They have nothing to do with anything at that point.
Let's get to some questions here. Luke Hayworth asks, who will win the NL Central, and tell me why it will be the Cincinnati Reds?
Oh my God. You know what? Now I will say that I do enjoy the Reds. I enjoy the Reds fan base. I think Ellie De La Cruz is so exciting to watch. Yeah. I actually have not interviewed him yet, and I'm sad about it because he just seems like such a dynamic, fun personality. But as a Southern Indiana girl, seeing the Reds do well would make me very, very happy. They have a great team full of a lot of personalities. Now, obviously, I grew up a Cubs fan, so that would be fun too. But I think the Reds are going to be good this year. I mean, they last year they had a really good end of the season, maybe not start of the season, but I remember when Ellie De La Cruz got called up, that stadium was insane. Yeah. I mean, it was packed, and that made my Midwest heart so happy. So, who was it? What was his name that asked the question?
Oh, that was Luke Hayworth.
Luke, I hope that your Reds do you proud.
It was so fun for that month and a half where it felt like everything was going right with the team, and then the inevitable happens down the line. But
they kind of put themselves in a bad place from the beginning of the season. It's hard to make up that much ground.
Yes.
So I mean, yeah.
Okay, IU Brian asks, who do you think the favorites are for getting the next MLB expansion teams? This has been something that's been talked about quite a bit. And obviously we've got this weird dance going on with the A's and Las Vegas and these wild stadium renderings where it looked like somebody like landed a spaceship on the Strip. But there's been other markets that people have been talking about as potential places that we might see either expansion or teams moving. I mean, what is do you have a read on that at all, or what do you think?
I don't have a great read on it because I don't know if you've heard, but the Rays are kind of going through trying to figure out their next move too. So
they're just relocating to a different part of St. Petersburg, right?
Just relocating to the parking lot next to the Trop. So, I would say I have no idea if there's legitimacy behind this idea. This is from my own head. I would honestly say that Nashville, right? I mean, I just think about that city as like a city that would really enjoy a baseball team. Like, don't you? I mean, the personality and the character of that city seems like baseball would fit perfectly.
It's one of those things about sports where not every city will handle all team types well. Like, you think about it. I mean, you got the cities that have 4 teams. You've got Indianapolis, which I actually think Indianapolis would have been a good baseball town, but it's unfortunately stuck between 4 markets that all consider it part of its territory.
That is the thing. Like, I do think Indy would be a really good baseball town, but you have people who are lifelong. I'm talking like with the Cubs, you have people who've been there are some 100-year-olds in Indy that have been, you know what I mean? Like that runs deep. The Reds, you got the teams that you hear the most of in Indy that people are fans of are the Reds, the Cubs, and the Cardinals.
Absolutely.
And that's diehard. I mean, I don't think you can mess with that.
And you got the White Sox. Jared Morris will get mad if we don't mention the White Sox. But yes, and you look.
Really want us to talk about the White Sox?
He would love it if we talked about the White Sox. Do you have anything to say about the White Sox?
Bless everybody with their season last year. I mean, come on. That's a way for the viewers to drop.
Yeah, that's how we lose audience as soon as we bring the White Sox up. No, I mean, you kind of have to look at markets and like who isn't being served. And Nashville is interesting because it depends on if you count MLS. And it's not to discount MLS because some of those teams are doing really well. I think Nashville SC has done a really good job of bringing in fans. But if you take the 4 major professional sports, which is what most people think of, Nashville's got 2 teams. You got the Titans and you've got the Predators. And you look at the passion that both of those fan bases have, the Predators especially, and you're like, it feels like they need something going on in the summer because right now they really don't have anything. Now, Nashville also kind of sucks in the summer from a weather perspective. I went to the Nashville Grand Prix for IndyCar a couple of years ago at the beginning of August. And I mean, look, I lived in Memphis. I lived in Miami. I know hot. That was hot. That was about as miserable. Wasn't helped by the fact that the circuit they picked for that race might have been the worst idea in IndyCar history, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, like that is a tough one. It's why, like, you'd have to really be cautious about the stadium that you put them in. But I think that area, they don't really have a team. They got the Braves, but the Braves are in another state. They're far away. The Cardinals have always tried to claim that area, but they're far away. It seems like a natural fit.
It does. I would agree. You know what's interesting about the Braves is you'll find like, and I didn't like remember this growing up, and it was before my time, but like so many people in Florida are Braves fans because the Marlins and the Rays didn't exist at that time. And so the only thing they could get was it radio, TV?
Well, no. So it's interesting. There are 2 national fan bases. Well, outside of the Yankees and the Red Sox, who kind of belong in their own category. There's like 2 really national fan bases in baseball. One of them is the Braves, and the other one's the Cubs. And the reason for that is when cable became a thing. WGN and TBS. TBS, yeah. And, they're like Ryan Voris, former doc student of mine who lives in upstate New York. He Braves fan, like grew up a Braves fan. I had one of my best friends when I was growing up in Lafayette, Indiana, was a Braves fan. Why? Because they were on television all the time. So that makes a big difference. And you're right. Like there wasn't another option. It's kind of like, I remember when I moved to North Carolina, for the 6 months that I lived there, and was expecting everybody to be Carolina Panthers fans. They weren't. They were Washington Redskins fans, because the Panthers were only like 10 years old at that point, and that was who they'd been watching for years. So it makes a big difference.
It takes a while. That's what we were just talking about, to build up generational fans. And I remember like Zach Eflin pitches for the Rays, and he grew up in Orlando. He's like, no, I grew up a Rays fan. He was like, I was like right when the Rays got here, I was like 8 years old. Like, I grew up a Rays fan. But it takes a while to create those generational fans, because if you think about it, how old are his kids now? His kids are like 4 years old. So it's like, it's going to take a while.
Yeah. It's the other interesting thing about what your job does. It's like, you have to put games in front of people so that they can watch them. And it's been one of the real struggles that baseball's had with regional networks and not being able to watch games regularly. It's like here, it's hard to watch Reds games despite them being the closest team. Yeah. And so I do hope baseball figures that out at some point, because even if you buy the MLB extra innings package, you might get blacked out in your own market for no reason that you can actually figure out.
Yeah, it's been hard. I get all those tweets. Trust me.
You're the
power control.
You're the one that's doing it, Tricia. You're the one that.
I'm so flattered that you think that I have that much power, but I don't.
So the Apple TV part of your job gets that you start the season with that, right?
Yep. Yeah. So we start the season next Thursday is opening day for the Rays, and then Friday our first Apple game is Yankees Astros in Houston.
Wow.
Be terrifying because Yankees fan. Anyways, I won't go into that. It's gonna be fun. I'm excited.
It'll be fun to watch you on that. How do if people have not watched this before? So this is a special package that you can purchase through Apple TV Plus. Is that right?
You just have to have Apple TV, and you can watch all the games.
There you go.
Yep.
Well,
easy peasy. If you can watch Ted Lasso, you can watch Friday Night Baseball.
Go subscribe to that right now, folks. You can watch Tricia every Friday as she's covering different Major League Baseball games across the country. So, well, I appreciate you joining us on the show. This was awesome. And I'll look forward to hopefully having you on again at some point further on in the season. We can talk about how things are going.
Anytime. Thanks for having me, Galen. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Tricia Whitaker joining us here on the show. We will go ahead and wrap up here. And folks, just a reminder, we'll be back with more chat on basketball. We'll be continuing our postmortem of the IU basketball season, and we'll have the CrimsonCast women's basketball show as well coming up this week as we preview Indiana taking on Fairfield in the first round. For Tricia, I'm Galen. This is CrimsonCast. We'll catch you folks on the flip side. Bring back the Bison. So long, everybody.